It started with a shrill, piercing sound that cut through the night like a knife. My phone vibrated violently on the nightstand, the screen casting an eerie glow against the darkness of my bedroom. Half asleep, I fumbled for it, the alarm tone sending a jolt of anxiety straight to my core. Emergency alert. Go indoors immediately. Do not look outside. Do not respond to any voices. I stared at the words, my mind sluggishly trying to process their meaning. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the window panes with an unsettling force. It wasn't a storm. The sky had been clear when I went to bed. Something felt wrong. I sat up, glancing at the digital clock. 2:17 a.m. An odd time for an emergency broadcast. My heart pounded as I threw off the blanket and stepped toward the window. Part of me knew I shouldn't look. The message had been clear. But curiosity, that insatiable and dangerous human trait, compelled me forward. Slowly, I pulled the curtain aside just enough to see outside. The street was empty, unnervingly still. The usual orange glow from the streetlights flickered erratically, casting long, shifting shadows across the pavement. Cars sat abandoned in driveways, doors slightly ajar as if people had left in a hurry. Then I saw them. Figures moved at the edges of the street, their silhouettes elongated and distorted in ways that defied logic. At first, I thought they were people. But the way they walked, glided, was unnatural. They didn't seem to have proper joints. Their limbs swayed like marionettes, moving in awkward, jagged motions. A woman stood motionless in the middle of the road, her back to me. She was barefoot, wearing a nightgown that billowed slightly in the breeze. Her head twitched to the side, as though listening for something. Then, slowly, she began to turn. I stumbled backward, yanking the curtain shut, my breath caught in my throat. My skin prickled with an unexplainable dread. Every nerve in my body screamed that I had just made a terrible mistake. My phone vibrated again. Another alert. Do not look outside. Do not let them see you. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. My knees felt weak as I collapsed onto the bed, gripping my phone so tightly my fingers ached. My mind raced. Was this some kind of elaborate prank? A citywide drill? No. This was real. The fear in my chest was too raw, too visceral. A faint knock echoed from my front door. I froze. The knock came again, gentle but insistent. A voice followed, soft and familiar. Hey, it's me. Open up. My breath hitched. It sounded like my neighbor, Kevin, the guy who lived 2 doors down. Friendly, always willing to lend a hand. But something in his voice was off. The cadence was slightly wrong, the tone just a fraction too hollow. I know you're awake. I saw your light. I didn't respond. My mind screamed at me to stay silent, to not move a muscle. The warning flashed in my head, do not respond to any voices. Another knock. More insistent this time. Come on, man. Let me in. The voice shifted slightly. It was still Kevin's, but there was an edge to it now, a sickly sweetness that sent ice down my spine. Something was imitating him. Something that knew just enough to sound human, but not enough to be convincing. I held my breath, gripping the sheets like a lifeline. The silence stretched unbearably long. Then, the doorknob rattled. The rattling of the doorknob sent a fresh wave of terror through my body. I clutched my phone, my fingers trembling as I watched the notification on the screen slowly fade to black. The silence that followed was even more unnerving than the knocking. Then, from outside, a scream tore through the night. It wasn't a normal scream, it was a distorted, elongated wail that sent a chill down my spine. It sounded human, but something was wrong. I forced myself to inch toward the window, careful not to disturb the curtains too much as I peeked through a tiny gap. What I saw outside turned my blood to ice. More figures had appeared. They moved in erratic, disjointed patterns, flickering in and out of the orange glow of the streetlights. Their forms were shifting, as if struggling to maintain a solid shape. The woman in the nightgown, the one I had seen before, was still there, but now she wasn't alone. Others stood near her, all perfectly still, their heads tilted slightly, as if listening for something. And then, all at once, they turned their heads toward me. I stumbled backward, nearly knocking over the lamp on my nightstand. My breathing became shallow, ragged. My phone buzzed in my hand again, and I hesitated before looking down. Do not look at them. Do not let them see you. I felt sick. My stomach twisted into knots as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Was the government sending these messages? Who knew what these things were? And why did it feel like they were responding to me specifically? The city outside was descending into chaos. The faint glow of distant fires illuminated the horizon, flickering against the silhouettes of buildings. The sound of car alarms blared in the distance, mingling with the confused shouts of people who had yet to understand the horror unfolding before them. I grabbed the remote and turned on the TV, flipping through channels, but most were static. Finally, I found one broadcasting an emergency message. A grim-faced news anchor was speaking in a rushed, urgent tone. The feed was grainy, the signal weak. For those just tuning in, we urge you to stay indoors. Lock all windows and doors. Do not engage with any individuals outside, regardless of their appearance. We have received unconfirmed reports that these entities mimic human voices and shapes. They are not. I repeat, they are not human. The screen flickered, and the image warped slightly. A new face appeared in the broadcast, a smiling, glassy-eyed man with an unsettlingly wide grin. His voice came through in a sickly, distorted tone. Come outside. I shut the TV off immediately, my hands shaking. My phone buzzed again. Another alert. They know where you are. A sharp, rapid knocking pounded at my door, harder this time. More desperate. I covered my mouth, holding my breath. The knocking stopped abruptly. Then came the voices. Not just one. Several. All overlapping. Some were familiar, voices of neighbors, friends. Even my mother. But they all carried that same hollow tone, that unsettling wrongness, like a recording played just slightly out of sync. Let us in. We need help. Please, open the door. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my back against the wall. The voices continued, pleading, shifting tones, trying to sound more desperate, more real. And then, in the briefest of silences, I heard something else. A whisper right next to my ear. I see you. The whisper sent a shiver down my spine, a cold and paralyzing terror that kept me pinned to the spot. My breathing was shallow, my hands clammy as I pressed my back against the wall, trying to convince myself that I had imagined it. But deep down, I knew better. The knocking had stopped. The voices had ceased. Silence hung in the air, heavy and oppressive, but I didn't dare move. I strained my ears, listening for any sign that they were still outside. My phone buzzed again, the sound making me jump. Do not open the door. Do not respond. They are not who they claim to be. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The warnings were getting more direct, more urgent. The entities outside, whatever they were, had adapted. They had learned how to sound desperate, how to mimic familiarity. And now, they were inside. A creak from the hallway made my stomach drop. My apartment wasn't big. The only way in was the front door, which was locked, deadbolt. Windows latched shut. Yet, something was moving beyond my bedroom. Another slow, deliberate creak of a floorboard. I reached for the baseball bat under my bed, gripping it tightly. My breath came in quick, shallow gasps. Every instinct screamed at me to stay put, to pretend I wasn't there. But then I heard it, a voice that froze me in place. Hey, it's me. I got in. It was Kevin. The same Kevin who had been knocking at my door minutes ago, the same Kevin who was supposed to be outside. But his voice was wrong. Off. Hollow, like it had been run through a filter, stretched and bent into something only vaguely human. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. My bedroom door was cracked open just slightly, leaving a sliver of darkness between me and the hallway beyond. And then, I saw it. A hand. Long fingers curled around the edge of the doorframe. Too long. The joints seemed to bend in the wrong places, the skin stretched unnaturally tight over the bones. The nails were dark, cracked, as if they had been used to scratch at something too rough for too long. I held my breath, gripping the bat tighter. "Why are you hiding?" The voice had shifted slightly. It still sounded like Kevin, but now it was layered, as though multiple voices were speaking at once, slightly out of sync. A glitching record stuck on a phrase. My phone buzzed in my hand. "Do not let it see you move." I froze, willing my body to stay still. My pulse hammered in my ears. The hand remained where it was, motionless. Then, after an eternity, it withdrew. The sound of retreating footsteps sent another jolt of fear through me. But it didn't leave. It was still inside. I listened, barely daring to breathe. The sound of something shifting through my apartment, opening drawers, knocking over objects, filled the silence. It was searching. For me. I needed to move. But how? If it saw me, I was dead. The messages had been clear about that. I had to be silent, invisible. My mind raced, searching for an escape route. The window? No. That would make noise. The closet? Too obvious. Then I remembered. The crawl space. Near my bed, hidden beneath a loose floorboard, was a small storage space I had never needed to use. It wasn't big, but if I curled up tight enough. Moving as slowly as humanly possible, I inched toward the floor. Every creak of the wood beneath me felt like a gunshot. The rummaging in the other room continued, things being overturned, drawers slammed shut. It was getting frustrated. My fingers found the edge of the loose board. Carefully, painstakingly, I lifted it and slid inside. My heart pounded so hard I feared it would hear me. I pulled the board back into place, plunging myself into darkness just as the footsteps entered my room. Silence. Then, a slow, deliberate knock on the wall beside me. "I know you're here." I held my breath, my entire body frozen in the darkness of the crawl space. The knock on the wall had been deliberate, patient, too patient. Whatever was out there knew I was inside. The silence stretched. The only sound was the pounding of my own heartbeat, deafening in my ears. Then, another knock. Closer this time. A scraping noise followed, slow and methodical, like nails dragging along the wooden floor. My fingers curled around my phone, but I didn't dare turn on the screen. One accidental flash of light, one sound, and it would know exactly where I was. Then, the voice came again. "I know you're here." It was still using Kevin's voice. Or at least, a warped, distorted version of it. It no longer sounded natural. It was stretched, fragmented, as if spoken by something that didn't fully understand human speech. I forced myself to stay still, barely breathing. The floor above me creaked as it moved. I could feel the weight shifting, its presence pressing down on the crawl space. It was listening. Then, something else happened. A new sound, coming from outside. A sharp tap against the window. It was subtle, almost too soft to notice. But in the suffocating silence, it might as well have been an explosion. My blood ran cold. There shouldn't be anyone at the window. I lived on the second floor. The tapping came again, rhythmic and deliberate, as if trying to get my attention. I clenched my jaw, resisting the overwhelming urge to look. I knew better by now. The alerts had been clear. Do not look outside. Do not let them see you. But the thing inside my apartment reacted. It stopped moving. The scraping against the floor ceased. It had heard the tapping too. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound. No movement. Just an unbearable, suffocating stillness. Then, a whisper. But not from inside the apartment. From the window. "Let me in." I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. The whisper was soft, almost kind. Almost. But there was something beneath it, something wrong. It was too smooth, too calculated, as if the words had been stitched together from pieces of other voices. The thing inside my apartment shifted. I could hear it moving toward the window now. Slowly, cautiously. Another whisper from outside. "I see you." Then, the sound of glass cracking. I shut my eyes tightly, willing myself to disappear, to be anywhere but here. The tension in the air was unbearable. Then came the sound of something wet and heavy sliding against the window pane. A smear of something dark spread across the glass, barely visible through the tiny sliver of space between my floorboard and the room above. The thing inside my apartment hesitated. It was standing near the window now. I could hear its breath, or at least something resembling breath. A slow, rattling inhale, followed by an unnatural stillness. Then came the voice, but this time it was different. This time, it mimicked me. "Please, let me in." A perfect replica. My voice, my cadence. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed it was truly me speaking. I clamped a hand over my mouth, suppressing a whimper. The creature was learning, adapting. The window groaned as the cracks spread. Whatever was outside was trying to get in. And whatever was inside, it was considering letting it. I had to move. Now. Slowly, carefully, I shifted my weight and prepared to reach for the loose floorboard. If I stayed here, I was as good as dead. The thing in my apartment might not know exactly where I was, but if the window shattered, if whatever was outside came in. My phone vibrated in my hand, nearly making me cry out in terror. The screen remained dark, but I could feel the message come through. Do not let them meet. I barely had time to process it before the glass finally gave way, shattering inward in a cascade of shards. And then, the lights went out. The darkness swallowed everything. I could feel it pressing against my skin, suffocating in its intensity. My breath came in shallow gasps as I strained my ears, trying to hear over the pounding of my heart. Then, movement. A shuffling sound from the shattered window. Something slithering across the floor, wet and deliberate. The air grew thick with the scent of copper, and I swallowed back the bile rising in my throat. I couldn't stay here. I had to move. Slowly, I slid my fingers under the loose floorboard, lifting it just enough to slip out of the crawl space. My limbs were stiff, my muscles protesting the sudden motion, but I forced myself to keep going. The sound of something heavy dragging itself closer urged me forward. I stayed low, my feet barely making a sound as I crept toward the hallway. My phone vibrated again. Do not turn around. Do not make a sound. I bit down on my lip to keep from gasping. Whatever was behind me, whatever had come in through the window, was aware of me. But it wasn't certain yet. If I ran, if I made any sudden noise, it would know exactly where I was. The hallway stretched before me, its end swallowed in shadows. I needed to get to the front door. But as I took another cautious step forward, the temperature around me dropped. A breath. Not mine. Right at my ear. A voice, barely a whisper, yet clear as if it had spoken directly into my skull. Stay. I lunged forward, all pretense of silence gone. The thing behind me reacted immediately, a guttural hiss erupting from its throat. I didn't dare look back. My fingers fumbled with the door handle, yanking at the deadbolt. It wouldn't budge. My hands were slick with sweat as I struggled to keep my grip. A scraping sound grew closer. Whatever was behind me was coming. Fast. Desperation took over. I slammed my shoulder against the door, the impact rattling through my bones. Once. Twice. A third time. And then, the door flew open. I stumbled forward into the cold night air, falling to my knees on the pavement outside. The world was different. No streetlights. No distant hum of cars or murmuring voices. The city was draped in a suffocating silence, the kind that made the hairs on the back of my neck rise. Buildings stood like tombstones, dark and lifeless, their windows hollow and empty. My phone vibrated once more. I lifted it with shaking hands. Do not look at the sky. I swallowed hard. The urge to glance upward was almost unbearable. It was as if something was pulling at me, whispering in the back of my mind, coaxing me into curiosity. But the warnings had been right so far. I kept my gaze fixed ahead. A flicker of movement caught my attention. Across the street, a figure stood motionless, silhouetted against the darkness. My heart clenched. Kevin. But it wasn't him. Not really. His posture was wrong, too rigid. And though the shadows obscured his face, I knew deep down I shouldn't go to him. Then he moved. Not walked. Moved. Like a marionette whose strings had just been yanked, his body jerking forward in unnatural, disjointed motions. And he was coming straight for me. Kevin, no, the thing wearing his shape, moved toward me with jerking, unnatural motions. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, but my body refused to obey. It was like staring into the abyss and realizing it was staring back. My phone vibrated violently in my hand. I forced myself to glance down, dread curling in my stomach. Do not speak. Do not move until it passes. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. The thing masquerading as Kevin twitched again, its limbs moving like they were disconnected from one another, like a puppet on tangled strings. It stopped in the middle of the street, head slowly tilting to one side, then the other. It was listening. I held my breath, pressing myself flat against the wall of the building behind me. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, loud enough that I feared it would betray me. The figure took another shuddering step forward. Then another. The way it moved made my stomach churn. It wasn't walking, not exactly. More like gliding forward in broken increments, each movement punctuated by an eerie, dry cracking sound. Then it stopped. For a moment, I thought it had sensed me. My muscles locked up as sheer terror gripped my entire body. But it didn't turn toward me. Instead, it raised one trembling hand and pointed upward. A cold chill wrapped around my spine. Do not look at the sky. I clenched my eyes shut, fighting the overwhelming urge to see what had caught its attention. My fingers dug into my palm, the sharp sting of my nails grounding me in place. The air felt heavy, thick with something unseen but undeniably present. A deep, distant hum filled my ears, a sound I wasn't sure was even real. It was low and vibrating, as if the sky itself was murmuring a warning in a language I couldn't understand. Kevin's figure twitched violently, as if being yanked backward by an unseen force. A wet, gurgling noise escaped his lips. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he turned and began to move away. Not back the way he had come, but toward the buildings, toward the places where people might still be hiding. I exhaled shakily, my entire body trembling. My phone vibrated once more. It knows you are here. Leave now. I forced my legs to move, stepping carefully onto the sidewalk. Every step felt agonizingly loud in the suffocating silence of the empty city. My only goal was to get somewhere safe, somewhere with doors I could lock, somewhere out of sight. Then, from behind me, a voice, my voice, whispered, "Where are you going?" I froze. I knew better. I had seen what it could do, how it could mimic. But hearing my own voice slither through the darkness, laced with an eerie, knowing smile, was worse than any nightmare I had ever imagined. My phone buzzed. Do not answer. Keep moving. I swallowed the fear clawing up my throat and forced myself forward. The thing behind me didn't follow. Not yet. But I knew it was watching. And worse, I knew it was waiting. I moved carefully, every step calculated, every breath measured. The thing mimicking my voice had gone silent, but I knew better than to believe it had left. It was waiting. Watching. The city around me remained eerily quiet, the usual hum of distant traffic, buzzing streetlights, and murmuring pedestrians all absent. It felt abandoned, stripped of life, leaving only me and whatever had taken its place. The weight of my phone in my pocket was the only anchor I had. Another vibration. Another warning. Keep moving. Avoid reflections. Avoid reflections? My stomach twisted. That was new. I swallowed my fear and pressed forward, keeping to the shadows, careful not to step too loudly. I could still feel the presence behind me, lurking just out of sight. Then I saw it, a gas station up ahead, its neon sign flickering erratically. The windows were shattered, the glass glinting like jagged teeth in the dim light. But it was shelter. A place to think. A place to breathe. I slipped inside, navigating around fallen shelves and scattered debris. The air was thick with the scent of spilled gasoline and something metallic, something rotten. I ignored it and crouched behind the counter, pulling my phone out with shaking hands. Another message appeared. Don't look at the security monitors. Don't look at your reflection. My pulse pounded in my throat. I risked a glance at the broken glass on the floor, careful not to let my gaze linger. The distorted reflection of the store stared back at me, the shelves and counters slightly warped from the uneven shards. But then, my breath caught. The reflection wasn't right. I was there, crouched behind the counter, but something else was beside me. A shape. Tall. Too tall. Its face was a blur of shifting features, like it was trying to settle on a form but failing. I forced myself to look away, my body trembling. The phone vibrated violently in my grip. It sees you. Don't run. Don't speak. The air grew colder. My breath came out in uneven gasps. The thing in the reflection wasn't just there, it was moving. And worse, I could hear it now, shifting, its presence pressing against the boundaries of reality. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to disappear. My phone vibrated again. Someone is calling your name. Don't answer. Then, from the entrance of the gas station, came a whisper. My voice. I see you. A slow, deliberate scrape echoed across the tile floor, inching closer. I held my breath, clutching my phone like a lifeline, knowing this moment would determine whether I made it out of here alive or became another echo in the hollow city. The whisper slithered through the stagnant air, curling around me like a living thing. I see you. It was my voice. My exact voice. But it wasn't coming from my throat. I clenched my jaw, pressing my back against the cold tile behind the gas station counter. The dim glow from a single, flickering fluorescent light above cast long, shifting shadows across the wreckage. My phone vibrated again, the screen glowing faintly in the darkness. Do not respond. Do not acknowledge them. A scrape. A slow, deliberate drag of something heavy across the floor. My breath hitched. It was closer now. I knew it was just beyond the counter, waiting. Testing. I had no choice but to move. Keeping my motion slow, I shifted my weight to my hands and knees and crawled toward the back of the store. Every shuffle felt deafening in the oppressive silence. The thing mimicking my voice didn't react, yet. But I could feel its awareness, like a cold, unseen hand resting on my shoulder. A shattered restroom mirror caught my eye. Cracks spiderwebbed across its surface, distorting my reflection into something unnatural. My reflection. No, not my reflection. The moment I saw it, it moved. My reflection did not match my movements. Instead, it turned its head toward me, its eyes hollow, its mouth stretching into an impossibly wide grin. I forced my gaze away, heart hammering. Another vibration. You are not alone. Leave now. I had to get out. Now. Staying low, I pushed through the employee door into the stockroom. Rusted shelves loomed over me, their contents scattered and forgotten. A back exit stood at the far end, slightly ajar. Freedom. Safety. But then I heard it. A voice, low, desperate, coming from a shadowed corner of the room. Help me. Please. I froze. It sounded human. Weak. Pained. But I knew better. Another vibration. Do not help them. They are not real. The voice whimpered. Please, don't leave me here. I tightened my grip on my phone and moved toward the exit. Every part of me screamed to run, to get as far away from that voice as possible. But as I pushed open the door, I heard it shift. A wet, slithering movement. Then, in my own voice, it whispered, "You were never supposed to leave." The lights flickered. And then, the world outside was wrong. The buildings stretched too high, their shapes unnatural, like bones jutting through flesh. The sky was a swirling void of colorless static. And in the distance, figures stood motionless, their heads tilted at an unnatural angle, as if listening. I wasn't in the city anymore. I had stepped into their world. And they had been waiting,